warning, what you are about to hear is born of long years of deep friendship, shared experience, brutal honesty, and the reconciling grace of Jesus Christ. Please, do not walk up to the first black or white person you know and start this sort of banter. It will not end well.
Fight or flight. White power has demonstrated a violence so efficient on black life that it has, and this was the design, that it has beat blackness into submission. And so subconsciously, if the option is fight or flight, black people will more than often than not flee. Nobody's gonna want to hear that. And many people gonna say, oh, they fight in their way, and they probably do. But at the end of the day, we understand that white power pays our bills. And so there's only so far that you're going to go, which is why the presiding bishop's going to call me the only time, supposedly my mentor, the man who was turned over to me when I came to the Episcopal Church, who I was turned over to, let me say, when I came to the Episcopal Church at the Why Serve conference on Episcopalians for Episcopalians of color who were discerning the ministry in the Episcopal Church, which is a crazy statement because they held it at Swanee, the University of the South. I stayed in Leonidas Polk Hall.
Perhaps not the best choice of venue.
Oh no, it was the best choice of venue to let me know what church I was entering. And so in this session where they say, well, we want to know what are your questions that prevent you from coming to ministry? I asked the question, how far can I push the church on white supremacy before y'all want to excommunicate me? Oh, come see me after class. And this is where they're like, well, we're going to introduce you to, there's some black people who have been able to do this and blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to introduce you to Michael Curry. This was when he was Bishop of North Carolina. Michael Curry was made one of my mentors. And when he was elected presiding bishop and I was elected to executive council at the same time, I was so grateful because I was going to have the opportunity to see my mentor on a regular basis. And I even told him in Salt Lake City, I told him when we were standing together taking pictures and whatnot, I told him, I was like, I understand, Lord Bishop, you know, I've appreciated your mentorship. I understand that's going to change because you're not going to have as much time for me. You're going to be presiding bishop. Like, you ain't going to have time. I understand that. And he's assured me, but I'm still going to be your mentor and I'm still going to blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. Thanks be to God. It's been a great thing that I'm also on council. So I know I'll have at least 3 times a year where I get to see you, blah, blah, you know. The first and only time that he has called me since becoming presiding bishop, we used to talk on the phone pretty regularly. The first and only time he had called me was about 2 years into tenure on council. Yeah, it was 2 years because I lasted 3. 2 years into tenure on council. And he called me because some white folks told him that they were concerned about my mental health. They're concerned about my mental health. They were just with me for 4 days. No one ever came to me and asked me anything. Why they come to you? Oh, well, you know how people are. So, I don't. We're supposed to be a beloved community. If they're concerned for me, if they think something's going on, why don't they come to me and ask me what's going on? Why they come to you? Well, you know, they had some issues with some things that you say. I said, oh, you see, white folks always think you crazy when you don't submit to white supremacy. He said, ha, 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 ha. You know what, presiding bishop, don't even worry. I understand. My job is to be Malcolm to your Martin. You go on ahead and you be Martin for them, and I'll be Malcolm. But again, there are very few black folk in the church who are going to assert their blackness as being created in the image of God when white power lets them know they don't give a shit. I mean, we damn near lost all of our HBCUs. The Episcopal Church at one time had 9, 12, some big number of HBCUs. We damn near lost all of them. We got Voorhees and St. Augustine's left.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody cares. And that's a racially motivated thing. The pension fund been raping and pillaging black clergy ever since. Not to mention that it was built by J.P. Morgan, who profiteered off of slavery.
Right.
The Union of Black Episcopalians works for the organization. Like I told them, when have you ever heard of a union that gets paid by those that it's representing the labor force against? But all these union chapters get paid by the diocese. The diocese hosts their events. The diocese does this. The diocese does that. They get budgetary constraints from the diocese. And so they ain't going to speak up, because if they open their mouth too much, they know, even if only subconsciously, they know that their budget is in jeopardy. When your bread is buttered by white power, but how are we ever going to get anywhere in terms of perichoresis, in terms of beloved community, in terms of oneness? How will we ever get anywhere if humanity isn't on the same footing, on a singular footing?
That's the next step, right? That's the place we haven't been. Because I remember a year or more ago, right, talking about this idea of the necessity for humility and repentance on the side of whiteness, and you talking about the elevation, and yet, right here to really ground it in the idea of the actions of white supremacy to dehumanize blackness, right? To elevate whiteness and to dehumanize black people,
Right.
black
It was
experience,
both
black
and.
life,
It was not just
both
elevate
and.
whiteness. It was also
Mm-hmm.
dehumanize blackness.
And so the necessity for a strong black identity to encourage, to lift up, to rebuild, and you've gone even further.
If for no
You've
other
gone even
reason, then
further
how does
today.
whiteness ever overcome its fragility if not in the context of strong blackness? If all white folks are ever around as docile, scared Negroes, how will they ever learn to treat a free person with integrity?
If you don't meet a free person, I'm almost right. It still has this sense, though, of that our work is contingent or dependent on something from blackness, right? Like we have to encounter in relationship strong black identity in order to do our work, to complete our work. And maybe that's the difference, right, between doing our work and completing our work, that is almost the final exam, the test of the work that we've done, right? Like if in undoing your white supremacy, if undoing white fragility, you can then interact with a free black man, like, okay, all right, then you've passed at least some initial threshold, right? But I'm careful about that.
And
It,
and with integrity, when we realize we're not ready, we understand that we're not ready. We don't try to show people how ready we are when we're really not.
Oh no, we do that all the
I
time.
know, but that's what I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Okay,
Like,
right.
here we are in an anti-racism commission in the Diocese of Central Florida, and Bishop Brewer is going to walk in with a case of books. There were 2 white people maybe on this committee, about 10 black folk. And he gonna walk in and give us each a book, The Skin I'm In. Like we don't know what it's like to be black. Master gonna educate us and help us understand. Because he read this book and he's like, man, this is what it's like to be black. Here, y'all black folks should read this. And he'll never say that's what he was saying. What he'll say that he was saying is he wanted you to know that he was reading too. Well, motherfucker, tell us about the book. Come in and do a presentation and talk about what you learned about the book and how it's going to shape your diocese. Don't give me a copy of the book. That's offensive.
Mm-hmm.
But see, I'm the only dumbass who's going to say that. Everyone else is going to feel it. Everyone else is going to say it under the cover of darkness. They're going to let you know, man, that was ridiculous. They ain't going to say him. They're going to say, thank you, Master. Thank you. Oh, man, thank you. I'm so glad you gave us this book.
And that's, again, that is your critique to have, right? Like I don't like, I'm like, and I wonder part of the part you talk about my preparation, right? And part of my gift, like, where did I get, right? Like, I remember Holy Comforter and Courtwright Davis talking explicitly about ebony grace, right? I have seen these pockets of places where that identity was affirmed.
Mm-hmm.
That was the foundation. I mean, the history of the Black Church at Howard University School of Divinity, right? Like, this was an affirmation that this is not only worthy, this is essential history that you have to know, right? Like, that's what was affirmed, and that's what I saw. And so I hold on to those pieces, at least in the midst of your experience, your critique. I mean, where you're coming from and what you've seen, and the hurt and the pain that you've experienced on all sides from all of this, and trying for me to hold on to the reality that I have seen, and to the validity of your experience at the same time, right? Because certainly, again, not my place to criticize and judge this response when I'm part of the power structure that has been traumatizing, punishing, murdering people for responding in the way that you want the response to come.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is that both and, which is why we say, tongue in cheek, but seriously, like, when we do this work, there needs to be like whites only section and coloreds only section, like, because there are those different dynamics.
Right. I don't want to lose something that you brought that I think is an important bridge and an important step.
Okay.
Right. Like, because we've talked about this, and I even realized we've talked about it normally using individual language. And maybe that was my assumption, because the language that we used was about people, right? Like that white people and Black people, right? Like, and so good white Western European, stock that I am, right? American that I am, right? I individualize that well, that's about individual people, the one person, right? Kind of thing.
Right.
But so even if you were talking about people more broadly, today we brought up and you brought in this idea that there's an institutional aspect to this, right? That there's a way, not just that people have to be humble and submit and be elevated and maybe deified, right? Like that. Like, there's this institutionally, this recognition that that not only does the institution need to humble itself and submit, right, but that the institutions have to be a part of affirming and raising a strong Black identity. That it's not enough that an institution just repent or be humble or submit or spend its money, to stop supporting, to take down the Confederate flags, right? All of you talked about the explicit, vitriolic white supremacy. Right. That's not enough. You gotta undo that. You gotta undo the genteel white supremacy. And even as an institution, find that way to support, affirm, elevate those places where Blackness and Black institution is laying new foundations for a strong Black identity within the organization.
Yeah. I mean, for real, whiteness has to even identify that genteel white supremacy exists and is a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, it's one of the reasons I ain't never liked Uncle Tom's Cabin. I was like, this is some bullshit. Mm-hmm. Harriet Beecher Stowe was a racist. She just didn't believe that white folks should it was beneath whiteness to treat other beings that way.
We're better than that.
She didn't believe that Black life mattered. or that blacks were fully human. There was no evidence that any of those beliefs, that she had any anti-white supremacist beliefs. She just believed that the definition of white supremacy was that we are better than this. We will treat people, things, living things, better than this.
I've heard it called the velvet glove over the iron fist of white supremacy in Virginia. The former historian from St. Paul's Richmond, who did work with their
I like
racial
that guy.
reconciliation.
Oh, he's former now?
Yeah, Chris.
He's no longer there?
He talks about it. Don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so.
I liked him, man. He was on point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, and that was his, like, he started his presentations he skipped over the whole slavery thing.
Oh, yeah.
He was just like noted, right? Like,
right.
This is settled,
yeah.
right?
And I understood,
let's talk about
I understood why he poo-pooed it, and I gave him credit. I gave props to that because I was like, yes, because you see the real problem.
Right. That velvet glove, that covered, right? Again, the Harriet Beecher Stowe, right? Like, we Episcopalians, we institutionally, we will fight for the rights of these folks because they deserve better.
But again,
and
a strong black identity doesn't have a place in the Episcopal Church.
Well, not if it's going to marry my daughter, right? Not if it's going to come sit in a pew next to me. Not if it's going to
try to tell me how I'm supposed to interpret the faith.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't no nigga gonna tell me how I'm supposed to interpret the faith. They won't say that because no one's supposed to use the N-word unless, your preferred group of black folks told you it was okay for you to use it.
Oh, right. Yeah, let's not go there again. But we won't say those words. We will say it in our votes.
Exactly.
And I've talked about this before, right? But
exactly.
Even when Presiding Bishop Curry says, look, hey, here's this way of love. I think it was the way of love, or maybe it was the beloved community, right? Way of love. I just want you to tell me what you do with this, right? Just tell me all the good things that you decide to do. I'm not even going to tell you what you have to do. I'm just going to say, when you do something good, just tell me about it, right? And Diocese of Virginia as a whole, as a body that I'm a part of, right? Like my legislative body, we said, hell no. We will not report anything.
And of course, because whiteness, of course, everyone will say it's not about the presiding bishop being black. It's about we're a diocese and we don't report to to 815.
It wasn't even that. It wouldn't even go that far. It was just like, hey, we've got too much to do already. Like this official, like we're
no. I'm saying when you pin them down on it, when you pin them down and say you all are disobeying because it was a black man, they'll say no, we don't have to obey. We're a diocese and we're independent and blah 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 blah.
We were 3 or 4 degrees from Kevin Bacon on that one. I mean, we were way back. No, it had nothing to do with race whatsoever. Absolutely. Yeah. So how do we what's the next step? I mean, and I'm going to say, how do we fix this? But what's the,
I mean,
because I'm particularly intrigued about this institutional part.
The only way is to acknowledge it, right? And then challenge it. So, you have all of these dioceses and things right now going on, Catherine Meeks going on and, talking about your brave spaces and whatnot. And, and the reason I pick on her is because here in Central Florida, she did a session. At the end of the session, after 3 hours of supposedly anti-racism training, the former canon to the ordinary, the one who didn't want to hire me because I didn't like the Confederate flag in Southeast Florida and his homeboy wanted to blacklist me and told him not to hire me. That man.
Right.
In retirement, so over 70, is going to stand up and say, after 3 hours of anti-racism training, he's going to thank Dr. Catherine Meeks because she didn't come off angry and she didn't make him uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And see, this is why I say all the church wants to do is remove vitriolic white supremacy and install genteel white supremacy as the rule of the land. Because how in the hell are you comfortable after being supposedly opened your eyes to the realities of white supremacy and how they infect society? How are you still comfortable? Like, if you are still comfortable, how did you really be challenged to look at white supremacy? Or are you just that much of a racist that you are challenged by the reality of white supremacy? And you're like, okay, cool. I'm good with that. I'm comfortable. Doesn't bother me. Didn't upset me. One or the other has to happen. Either you were not challenged and the time was wasted, or you are such a racist that even in the context of being supposedly challenged on the ills of racism, you heard all the truth about racism and was comfortable with it. And so the church has to stop seeking to be comfortable in the faux comfort. You know, they should probably listen to what we said about white comfort in that episode we did a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And what is comfort and cum forte? What is the strength that they need in this time?
Mm-hmm.
And look for people who will really comfort them so that whiteness can stand firm in the battle against wickedness. But so long as the church is just looking for people who going, black folk who going to come and say some things that's going to sound okay, and, somebody sent me what Stephanie Spellers and Winnie Varghese, and I'm sorry to drag Kelly Brown Douglas into it.
Now I might have to throw down.
That's what I'm saying. I'm sorry they dragged her into it because she got a good name. But when I read it, I was like, the only reaction I had was like, oh, we can say white supremacy now, huh? I see. White folks are comfortable now with us saying white supremacy. Okay, cool. And how are we preparing people as the church if that's what we're doing, right?
But that's not their job, right? That's my job. That's us. That's on me.
Well, then then they shouldn't be in power. Nobody said it wasn't Joseph's job. When Joseph was ruler of Egypt, nobody said it wasn't Joseph's job to get things back in order. Joseph didn't mess it up. Joseph was in jail. Joseph was at the bottom of the social rung, the bottom of the social ladder.
It wasn't a ladder. He was in a pit. Sorry.
Joseph was at that bottom of that pit.
He had to climb out of the pit to get to the ladder, to get to the bottom rung of the ladder. Sorry. Okay.
And so he had nothing to do with the mess that Potiphar and Pharaoh and all of them had created. He didn't get to his position of authority and say, you know what? It's not my problem. It's not my work. No, he had to do the work. And those in power were afraid of Joseph. They were terrified. They had wrongfully imprisoned this man. So until the church wants more Joseph and less Jester.
And my focus ever has to be on the system that creates the pressures
to make those decisions.
To force people into these decisions.
You're right, because that's what white power will say. White power will easily say, see, when black folks got in control, look what black folks did. Without understanding, you created the system where Michael Curry came into presiding bishop and felt that the best thing he could do was not be too black. You created the system where Barack Obama became president and the best thing that he could do was not let y'all know that he was black. Let me make sure that these white folks don't feel too threatened by my blackness. That becomes the first order of business.
Of all sorts of historic and modern layered systems that we have created. right? To maintain and protect white comfort, white power, white control, white priority.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for me, I guess it's a place of compassion. I mean, on top of everything else, right? These are the life choices that we are trying to force on people. On top of all of the other violence and trauma that we have done, we are trying to force people to make these foundational, fundamental decisions
Not even
about
trying.
incarnating
These
their,
are the choices that you are forcing people to make. That white power forces people to make.
well, yes, I guess I want to be clear about the distinction between some people have chosen not to take the choices that have been presented to them, right? I mean, or maybe the most extreme versions of those choices, right? Like to choose excommunication, to choose martyrdom, to choose, and so I, I don't ever want to claim complete power and authority over Black life in the sense that, well, these are the only choices that they have, right? Like, so that's why I'm holding on to
Mm-hmm.
this is what we're trying to force, a choice we're trying to force, because there have been people who've broken out and broken through somehow and made incredible, and lots of people who have made in places have made incredible contributions and left incredible gifts and legacies and impacts. So yeah, I mean, I just for us, for the white church to realize that on top of everything else, right? These are the twisted, evil violations of being that we're trying to force on people through the choices that we present
Mm-hmm.
about how they can be and how they can be in our spaces.
Mm-hmm. Right. Our spaces.
Yeah.
You can be here, but remember, this is our space. And we will determine how long you stay here or not. If you act in a way that appeases us, comforts us, you can stay.
And that's not new.
If you make us uncomfortable, you gotta go.
It's just our version of, house slaves and field slaves. It's our version of countless utter iterations of, we can love you as an individual but never as a race. You can climb high but not close. You can come close but not high. I mean, of all of the variations, we'll use you to sell stuff and we'll pay you and but we'll never let you in.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never be in control. I mean, it is the most recent iteration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, it was like that was the nature of the conversation, right? Like the Episcopal Church, what would it be if Black Episcopalians used the church as a training ground for fighting white supremacy? Outnumbered, outfunded, outgunned. What if Blacks learned how to navigate the complex structures of the Episcopal Church with such efficiency that we could wield some semblance of power within the church? I imagine it would go a long way for doing the same in the American landscape.
The Institute for Training the Agents of Wakanda.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like we have in Black Episcopalians, we have an advantage that the Black church doesn't have. They live in a world on Sunday that doesn't have any intersectionality with whiteness. Their church space. I mean, yes, the context in which they do church, the issues that they address in church. I'm not saying, well, I'm saying white power doesn't affect who's going to be their pastor, who's going to be their bishop, what their liturgy is going to look like, what types of things they do. Now, yes, when you have to interface the church with the world in terms of taxes and those types of things, then yes, white power comes into play. But in terms of ecclesiology,
Mm-hmm.
white power has no bearing on their spiritual life. And that's usually the thing that they look at and ridicule Black Episcopalians for. But how do we take that and turn that into a blessing?
Thank you for listening to Racial Heresy. Be sure to visit our website, racialheresy.com, to post your questions, comments, and feedback, and to share your own stories of life as a racial heretic. Want to hear more? You can find past episodes of Racial Heresy on iTunes and the Racial Heresy website. Want to hear even more? Invite Racial Heresy to speak at your conference, council, church, training, or event. Email us at ebonyandivory@racialheresy.com or visit our website for information on speaking engagements.